Hello, my name is Sean O'Neill. Welcome to our audience around the world. In today's webinar, we'll answer the question, why do travelers pay that way? We'll address how people pay for vacation packages based on a 6-country study of 12,000 people who had booked a vacation package online in the past year. The study was done by Worldpay, our partner in today's event. We'll be sharing practical actions that you can take with you and you can use in your business to save and make money. I'm Sean O'Neill, editor of Tnooz in the Philadelphia area. I'm joined by Quinn, CEO of Tnooz in Connecticut. Leading our presentation today is Thomas Helldorff. He's the VP of Airlines and Travel at Worldpay, and he's speaking to us from London. You'll be hearing from our presenter and about Worldpay very shortly. Just a bit of housekeeping, 3 things. First, Tnooz is recording today's webinar and will make a replay available to you along with the slides. So if you can't attend and listen in for the full hour, you will receive access to the video and the slides by email afterward. You'll be able to share the link with your colleagues about the replay and the slides so you can get them buy in and making decisions. Secondly, we will have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. When you have a question, please use the box on your GoToWebinar dashboard and type in your question. I'll read it and then ask the presenters to answer it. I'll ask Thomas to answer the questions that you have. You'll see the questions box as one of the drop-down menus in your GoToWebinar control panel. Third and last thing, we're asking some poll questions of the audience today so that we can adjust our presentation to better match the type of audience we have. So please answer your poll questions using your GoToWebinar tool. Our first poll today is, where are you located? Note that you can see that it's North America, EMEA is for Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific. We know with the time difference that some people will be not able to be joining us right now, but will still have interest in watching the replay and the slides. We're grateful to everyone around the world, no matter where you are, for joining us today for this presentation. It looks like about 1 out of 4 of you are joining us from North America, while the majority is joining from Europe. But whether you're in Latin America, Asia, or elsewhere, we're very grateful to have you today. So I'm going to hand this over now to Thomas Helldorff of Worldpay. Helldorff.
Hello, thank you and welcome to this webinar. I want to start with just putting Worldpay and payments into a bit of context. So if you have a website and if you want to sell to your customers, somewhere in that process you will need the capability to take payments. So you'll have a payment element within your booking process, and that's where we fit on. So you need a gateway. So you need a link between your website and an acquiring bank, and the acquiring bank is the bank who then receives those transactions and forwards them to the respective card schemes. That's for credit cards, MasterCard, Visa, Amex, Diners, and so on, but also for alternative payments, and that is all and everything like wallets or local debit cards. That is in particular a section that we're going to touch today. You will want to do that in many currencies, so you need some sort of currency exchange mechanism, and you may not want to accept all traffic or all the transactions. You only really want to have the good business, those that are not from stolen credit cards. So you will need some fraud tools in there to filter out the transactions that you will not want to have. And then you can also pay your suppliers, especially if you're a marketplace and if you want to or need to forward the revenue that you're taking in to all your actual providers and partners that actually execute and provide that service. So Worldpay is offering all of that, really. It's a global leader in payments, and we're covering all those components. We're Europe's biggest acquirer, which is our main core function. We've done that for about 30 years, and we're doing that for more than 400,000 merchants around the world. 13 billion transactions what we process a year. So during this presentation, we'll have processed about 1.5 million transactions alone. And the other thing that differentiates us from a lot of the providers in the industry is that we really focus on complex markets like travel. So we do, alongside travel, we do look after retail, airlines, DC, which is digital content, and we look after gambling. So we are seeing ourselves as experts in the travel business. We not only see the travel vertical as one, but we actually break that down even further into online travel agents, cruise, marketplaces, rail, coach, hotels. We love that industry. This is what we're all about. We work together close with partners, the likes of Amadeus, Sabre, and especially in the airline sector, many others of the system and distribution providers. So really, I think we see ourselves, especially in travel world, as that leading provider of payment services. So that was a little bit about Worldpay. Sean, can you let us know a bit more about the audience? Where are you working? Can we do our first poll?
Yes, our next poll is what type of company do you work for? If you'd be able to tell us if you're a supplier, for example, working for an airline, hotel, or rail company. If you're a travel agency or TMC, an online travel agency, or if you're a technology provider working for a marketplace or other. It looks like we have a good mix today. A lot of people who are technology providers. We have about 15% are suppliers, meaning airlines, hotels, and rails. About 12% are travel agencies or travel management companies. 17% are OTAs. So I think Thomas Helldorff, that's a sort of an interesting sort of a mix across segments, don't you think?
Yeah, very good. And so most of you, at least half of you, will have your own distribution capabilities, and you will want to sell directly to your customers. So I hope this content is especially relevant for you. So before I introduce the topic of today, why do they pay that way? It all really started about a year ago when I was at the customer conference, and I was standing out there and presenting the global payments report. Now this is just a listing of all the countries that we think are interesting for the online and e-commerce world, and we list for every country the payment methods that are prevalent in those countries. So it's a nice lookup tool for yourselves if you want to go abroad outside the market that you do know. It's a good place to find out what the payment methods are. And I was presenting. It all went fairly well until the Q&A. I really rattled through all the answers. I had all the numbers. I looked pretty good until a lady raised her hand and asked, sorry, can you explain me why? Why do they pay that way? And I was standing up there a bit lost and looked at all my colleagues, and they were just shaking their heads and not knowing what to say either. So they couldn't really help me. And ultimately, at the end, I had to promise her I will have to follow up because I just didn't know. So came back to the office, tried to find out a bit more. So why do they pay that way? And nobody could really answer that question to me except for anecdotal knowledge from different countries. So we decided we need to do something about it. We really want to find out why people pay that way. And on the next slide, we decided to do a research piece. So we asked 12,000 people who had booked a vacation package online in the past year. And we wanted to find out why they pay that way that they do. And we've divided the findings into 3 categories. The first one is about culture, demographic, and attitude towards payments. So we really wanted to see, it's actually the next slide, we want to see what are the influencing factors when it comes to deciding what payment methods you are choosing or want to choose to pay for your holidays. Is it age? Is it demographic? Is it gender? Is it how frequent you travel? What are the drivers behind those choices? The second part was about where and how people actually convert. So where do they hit that pay button, and what do they feel about that when they actually convert. The third part was about payments while they were on vacation. So while they were traveling or while they were in resort or at their destination, and how they pay for extra travel components that they were consuming along the way. So before we dive into the first set of findings, Sean, can we do the next poll about alternative payment methods?
Yes, Thomas. Do you offer alternative payment methods? If you could please let us know. We hope to try to tailor the responses here accordingly. Do you offer alternative payment methods? Looks like a majority of you do offer alternative payment methods. Again, we appreciate everyone voting in the poll and using the poll tool to the right. So about half of you are offering it. About 20% say it's not applicable, and 18% say no. Over to you, Thomas.
Yeah, so get the not applicable or the other technology providers who don't really sell themselves. So no surprise for that. It is astonishing. I would have thought that a lot of you, or a lot less of you, are actually offering payment methods, because we all know about the difficulties and the limitations that the reservation systems, that GDSs pose. So probably all those who do offer alternative payment methods will not be surprised about the findings on the next slide. So what we have found out is that age is a driving factor. So this slide here shows those who are 56 to 65-year-olds and their likelihood to use anything else but credit cards. So very high in Australia, credit cards, kind of high, not a surprise in Germany, because we have a lot of debit cards and bank transfers there. And also in China, surprisingly, only very few use the wallets that we see. If you compare that to the 18 to 20-year-olds, they are the ones driving the wave of alternative payment methods. They are the generation who grow up with those alternative payments. They really live and breathe. And it's a couple of aspects, probably. First of all, they are a lot more technology driven, and they grow, as I said, with that technology wave. So they would use things like wallets, PayPal, because they've always been around, and it's not a matter of them having to train on it, but they just grow up and live with it. The other aspect is probably they don't necessarily have access to credit cards, and it gets harder to get access to credit cards. So especially if you want to target the younger generation, and that age generation will be the ones who will fill all your seats and buy from you, and they will be the driving market force in the future. So if you are targeting those customers, make sure you have alternative payment methods available for them. So that's a key message. It's really, if you don't see them today as part of your traveler portfolio, it's really them who are going to drive you to that. And as I said, yeah, we know the limitations, especially in the airline world, but we have to crack it as an industry. We really got to get our heads around how to be able to offer those and how to align all the downstream processes for all those alternative payment methods. If you think about if you have to refund them or reverse them because a booking and the ticket issuing didn't go through. So yes, it is complex. It is a bit more difficult. But unless you want to miss out on those age groups, we really have to crack that. So congratulations to all of those who already offer alternative payment methods. And here's a challenge for all those of you who are still having that ahead of you to adopt to that. Before we dive into the next highlight of the findings, let us do the next poll. Sean, can you introduce that, please?
Yes, sure. Our next poll is, do you think installment payments would be popular with your customers? Again, do you think installment payments would be popular with your customers? Is it yes for all customers? Yes for some customers? Not really, or not applicable based on your business? We thank everyone for participating in the poll today. It really helps us. It seems like a majority, 56%, say yes for some customers. It is applicable, and an additional 9% say yes for all customers, while for others it's not really a factor and not applicable. So over to you, Thomas.
Yeah, interesting. I would have guessed the same. I would have thought, yeah, in some countries it's really applicable, but yeah, kind of interesting for most. So you'll be surprised by the findings if we go to the next page. And we'll start off with Brazil, which is one of the countries where it's kind of obvious. So installments do exist in Brazil. They are very common, and everybody is using them. And almost if you don't offer installments above a certain amount, then basically you can't really sell. The big surprise were all the other countries. Even in Germany, where we thought that this is really a debit country, a saving country, even there, 45% of the respondents says yes, they will be interested in installment payments. And you can see all the other countries in between. 82% India, 76% Australia, 72% China, 72% US. It really surprised us. It probably shouldn't have. So if you look at all the alternative payment methods that are evolving and coming out into the market, and like Klarna, just to name one of them, or even MasterCard has now mandated us to offer installment payments in the UK as of next year. So if you have a UK credit card and your issuer has signed up to that, you will be able to pay in installments on your credit card. So they certainly have picked up on the trend as well, and one can only imagine what happens if that is successful in the UK. It will just be rolled out across Europe and the rest of the world would be my guess, but that's just my personal guess. So it has surprised us that there is such a demand for it. And that is in contrast a little bit to what we have found out in the next slide. So whilst a certain type we dig into that bit is really open to credit, and I probably would count myself into that as well, having a family with 2 children and trying to get that all done in one payment is and can be quite a challenge. So I'm certainly probably one of them who would take up on that. We've found that the younger generation, the 18 to 25-year-olds, and certainly even more so the even younger generation, they're not too fond of credit cards, and they're not too fond of spending on credit. And the more I talk to colleagues in the industry and outside the industry, they resonate that they're seeing the same things. That younger generation, they prefer to save up and then go on holiday. So what does that mean for you as a travel provider? It again comes back to the fact that just offering credit cards only is not going to be good enough. So you will need payment methods to allow that generation to access their funds on their bank account. So these are debit cards, wallets, where you can use to top up your wallet from your bank account. And there were bank transfers, like in Germany you have Sofort and Ideal. So again, it's the young generation that not only because they are very technology affine and they like the alternative payment methods because they just grow up with them, or they don't get a credit card, but it's actually also a conscious choice not to use credit cards for traveling. So these were just two of the highlights of the findings around the first part, around the attitudes towards when people choose the payment methods that they want to use to pay for their vacation. The next part of the survey was about booking the vacation. And we've always been fascinated by statistics that talk about the conversion of bookings on mobile devices. And a lot of them talk about the research on mobile and the whole how often people use mobile phones to look and to get inspiration. But what we wanted to find out is how many people actually are prepared to convert on their mobile phone? How many people actually buy that high ticket value holiday or flight on their mobile phone? And before I show you the results, maybe we do another poll, Sean?
Yes, let's do this next poll, please. Everyone, please participate. What percentage of your customers would pay for travel on a mobile device? What percentage of your customers would pay for travel with a mobile device? If you could vote now, please. It seems interesting that it's about a quarter of you would say less than 5% would be willing to pay for travel on a mobile device. About 17% of you say it's about 6 to 15%. Another 17% it's about 16 to 25%. And then the rest is much higher levels of adoption, you believe, for actually paying for travel on a mobile device. I'm kind of struck by these results. Does this fall in line with the other research you've seen, Thomas?
Yeah, it kind of mirrors our internal assumptions that we had before. So some of us said, it's not really applicable because, listen, really, if you want to do a 1,000 pounds trip, you really want to do that on a big screen where you can compare everything and can really look at all the images and make sure all the dates are right, and you have your flights open on one window and your hotels on the other window. So quite a complex transaction, really. And my colleagues in Asia were saying, no, I would go for much higher, and let's look at the results. It was quite a surprise. So the overall number of people who are willing to actually really book and transact on a mobile phone and a tablet was 17%. And yeah, it did surprise many of us. And if we look even deeper into the findings, it becomes a bit clearer why that high of a number, and it also reveals a very, very strong focus on a certain market. Can we move on to the next slide? Here you see Germany compared with China. So in Germany, 1 in 100 was prepared to actually convert. Now, in China, we found out that it was actually 32% were willing or are actually transacting and booking their flights or their holiday experiences, actually holiday experiences in particular, on a mobile phone. And it did surprise me. And talking to my colleagues and partners in the country, they said, I was talking to one provider of ancillary marketplaces for an airline, and he said, and he showed me on his mobile phone the live ticker of conversions of ancillary services on mobile phones in Thailand. And it was tracking between 49 and 51%. So it's really Asia driving that mobile revolution. Yes, in Germany, in the US, I think it was 5% who would be willing. So I completely understand all of you who selected that first bar, saying it's probably less than 5%. And congratulations to those who did say, I think it was 27% who gave a much higher number. You guys are probably the ones already active in the Asian market, and you would have seen that statistic, and you would have seen it for yourself. So my message to you, and what does it mean to you? Don't forget your mobile payment experience. So when you do optimize your browsing experience, your shopping funnel, don't stop just before the payment experience. Make sure your payment window is mobile optimized as much as possible. Make sure you reduce the amount of data that you need to enter. In the gambling and digital world, we have the concept of one-click payments, where if you're a regular customer, you basically reduce that payment experience to one click, or you can push it to the Uber experience, where you're not actually ever really go through that conscious payment step. You just basically by getting out of the taxi, you assume, and it is paid. So ensure that mobile experience gets as much as possible a really frictionless experience. And in particular, if you think about offering ancillary and additional services outside your core proposition. So if you are I mean, the easiest example is if you are an airline and you start to sell ground transportation as you arrive, why not store the payment details of the first transaction in a user profile? And if you then use your mobile phone as a concierge while you arrive, why not then keep selling additional bits and pieces and make that payment experience a swipe with your finger over the home button of your phone? Because you can with new technologies, you can create those payment experiences. So really the message, think about mobile, and the more you work in Asia, the more urgent it is that you do that now, and I guess it will also come to the other countries and the other continents over time. But for now, it's definitely APAC who is driving that experience and who is pushing the experience there. So moving on to the next part of the research, and it kind of follows on from there. We looked at how people would like to pay while they're out there. What are their payment choices, and how do they like to transact? And what we have found is that today people still heavily rely, if you can move on to the next slide, people heavily rely on cash, and that's probably no surprise. Followed by credit cards, and then only is debit cards. And if you ask them how they would like to pay, alternative payments come out really high. And when you dig into the details and the countries, again, it's the young and it's people in Asia driving that need. So if you think about it, if you have booked your holiday with a wallet, or if you booked your holiday with a PayPal or Alipay or with a debit card or with a bank transfer, and then you fly abroad and you try to rent a car and they ask you for a credit card. Or if you try to check in a hotel and they say, can I have a credit card? That's not a good experience. And people would love to use these alternative payment methods whilst they're out and about. Yes, one of the questions we ask them is how confident are they that these form of payments are actually accepted, and the majority of the people replied that they're actually not confident at all, and they actually probably know that it doesn't work, but they would like to. Now here is the opportunity for you. Here is the opportunity for those who want to offer all these services along in some sort of travel concierge. If you're able to offer your customers payment methods that they cannot use when they're in destination, then you have that advantage. You have that opportunity to transact, to offer them a way to transact, which they're struggling while they are out and about. So really the message here is, think about the advantage that offering alternative payment methods can give you ahead of those who are offering their services locally in destinations. It really can drive behavior for those customers to come to your site, back to your site, and buy more and more of those travel components that you usually pay with a credit card or in cash while you're at the destination. So that was the main finding when it comes to paying at the destination. The other component was really, and the next slide shows about them willing to use different devices to purchase. And again, it's kind of tightly tied together. It's customers are even willing to use their smartphones and smart watches to purchase travel experiences. So just imagine a scenario where you arrive at the airport and there's a message pinged to your smartwatch saying, look, there's a limo waiting outside if you want that can bring you to the hotel that we know where you are, and it's going to cost you 35 local currency units. Just swipe on your phone and that taxi will be waiting for you outside. So these kind of experiences, again, it's Asia driving that willingness. We even had a very high response to VR applications, which probably pushes us into how we can utilize those to actually drive selling ancillary services. So it's probably a bit further out. But if you think about smartwatches, all these extra services, like at the airport, if you have a fast track through security, if you just ping that message at the right moment and allow your customers, your passengers, to just swipe their finger to do that purchasing transaction, then it becomes a really, really attractive proposition. So I can't see anybody trying to enter a credit card number into the smartwatch. Mind you, even saying it into the smartwatch, that would be one way. But really, if you want to make use of those next generation devices, you really have to create a very, very slick payment and conversion experience. That is the two highlights from the paying while they're on holiday, and that brings us already to the summary, really. So key takeaways. Do expect an increase in demand of installment payments. So whilst that is very common and really day-to-day business in countries like Brazil or South Korea, it is certainly going to come to other countries as well, with MasterCard offering that sometime next year, and alternative payment methods more and more moving into that space, like Klarna and PayPal has talked about that a long time already, and then Alipay. A lot of those payment methods will start or are already providing credit facilities, and we see a huge demand for that. Do you expect an even higher demand for alternative payment methods? Yes, we're struggling as an industry, but many of you, as the poll shows, have already embraced these alternative payment methods. We really see that we have to crack that. If you want to attract the young generation, if you want to operate in countries in APAC, but also in countries like Germany, ideal in the Netherlands, if you don't offer them, it's really, really going to be hard for you to transact. So don't just assume, just because it works in your home country, this is what I can do everywhere else. If you are working in the US only and you offer credit cards only, happy days. But as soon as you step outside, do take a look at the prevalent alternative payment methods and do think about what generation, what's your customer profile that you're trying to attract, and do cater for their needs, especially for the young ones. Their needs are changing, their needs are evolving, and if you want to tap into that market, make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're prepared for mobile first. I mean, we've been hearing that for a long time, and we really see that now coming, and not only coming, but it's actually there already in Asia. People who are booking their holidays with alternative payments, they would like to do that during their holidays. Again, a massive opportunity for a lot of you who do offer these services around your core proposition. You see that with flights, you see that with hotels, you see that with online travel agents. They all try to get into that space. They all try to offer more and more services. Here is your head start against all those local providers who will not be able to provide those alternative payment methods. You, on the other hand, you have that ability and capability. So you can drive the behavior, you can drive those bookings towards your site versus them buying it in cash while they're out there. And yet, last point, again, iterating, mobile revolution has started, but for now, our research shows it's in China and India, but we see it across the APAC countries. It's coming, and it's going to be big. So that summarizes it. If you're interested in more details, we have created a website where you can drill down into sectors that you're looking for. You can look at the different countries. You can select your core market that you want to attract. You can select age groups, and you can basically interact and play with that website to find out more, and to find out more in particular relevant to those countries where you would like to go into. If you have any detailed questions, either write them now in the Q&A, or drop us a line on the website that we have here on the window. Yeah, with that, I would like to hand back to Sean and open the Q&A session.
Yeah, so Thomas, it was an excellent presentation. We'll head straight to the questions. We'll have Quinn, our CEO, joining us if he has some comments. But first, a question from the audience. Can Thomas please explain how installment payments could work? Does the supplier have a mandate to charge the client the amount over, let's say, 3 or 6 months? Or does the client have the opportunity to pay for one transaction and then ditch the contract to pay the balance? The big question is, are the repayments taken like a direct debit system, or does the client, the cardholder, need to initialize each payment?
There's not one answer. So there's different systems out there in the market. The most common one is where actually the cardholder's issuing bank is managing those installments. So for you as a merchant, you will get paid immediately. That's also that works for some of the credit card methods, but it's also the way some of the alternative payment methods work. So you as a merchant, you get paid immediately. The card holder then, or the user of the alternative payment method, then has an agreement with that scheme to pay back in installments. So they ensure that they get paid, they get a premium for that credit line, they will chase all those who have paid late. So that's one main way of working. It's actually the easier way for you out there in the market, because you don't really mind if somebody doesn't pay because it's not your risk. Ultimately, you will get your money immediately, and you can fly the passenger, or you can provide that service. The other way, which is, for example, working in Brazil, is actually that the merchant providing the credit line, typically together with the acquirer. So in Brazil, for example, we work with those merchants, and we break that transaction down into multiple individual transactions over time, and ensure that the card gets billed. Now, in that scenario, it's the merchant's risk if the person doesn't pay or default. So you have to look a lot closer into how the customer is doing with paying back, and you have to react as an airline or travel provider if those payments don't come in anymore. So you want to make sure that most of that trip is paid back before the person flies, or you have a good mechanism in place to chase your money. And typically also the premium in those cases go to the merchant, so they can cover that risk.
Fantastic, and thank you, Gavin, for that question. Julio Garcia is asking, what other payment alternatives are available in Latin America in general? Where his agency is at in Colombia, Argentina, the Sabre GDS have developed with WorldPay Brazil, Cobribem, a credit card payment platform, and agents can access it through their Sabre screens. Is there anything you could say about payment alternatives that are applicable in Latin America?
Yes, Latin America in general is a very diverse market, and in addition to payment complexity, you have all sorts of complexities around getting funds out of the country, and all sorts of currency limitations and tax implications. But in general, what we find very common in those countries are cash payment methods. Boleto is probably the most known, is where the travel service provider, at the end of the booking process, they issue a barcode that the traveler can print off, And then they can take that to the local convenience store and pay either in cash or typically in cash. That triggers a notification back to the service provider through us, the acquirer, saying yes, that has been paid. And then the service provider can release the itinerary or release the e-ticket. So cash payments are quite strong. In regards to Sabre and access to various countries, that we're working quite close. As the question was, we have acquired a company that was called Copperbem, and to expand our capabilities in the market. So we are rapidly increasing our capabilities in the region, and we are enabling not only to process payments online, but we're also increasing our capabilities to process the IATA BSP files in many of those countries.
Fantastic. Another question from the audience. Peter Kelly would like to know what alternative form of payments beyond credit and debit cards WorldPay can support and where.
So we do have a list of about 300 alternative payment methods that you can use through our systems all across the world. Now, bear in mind, some of them, or actually probably many of them, are not really relevant for the travel sector. So when you think about using alternative payment methods, do keep in mind the limitations that each individual one has. So for example, all sorts of mobile phone billing payment methods or vouchers that are predominantly used to buy digital goods, they have a transaction limit of sometimes the equivalent of $100 or $200. So you can rule out some of those immediately, even if they're very, very popular in a certain country. Then you got to look at the risk profile of some of those payment methods. So for example, bank direct debits, they do work in Germany, and they do work because there are very tight scoring mechanisms in place. But if you want to use those ones outside Germany, or even if you want to use them for travel, the customer can request his money back for, I think, anything up to 6 months after the transaction without really having to prove much or justify much why he wants to have the money back, and then the merchant has to fight for his money. So do look at the risk profile of the different payment methods, and then decide whether you are willing to take that risk to access or to reach more customers. The next component is really the complexity in the back office processes. So some of the payment methods, whilst they're very widely accepted, like Western Union, it's very easy to take a Western Union, but if you have to refund or reverse a Western Union transaction, you'll be struggling, because where do you send the money to? So do look after do look into the reversals and what happens if something goes wrong scenarios. So if you reduce then the available payment methods or the possible payment methods to those that are actually really relevant, you probably can narrow it down to some 30, 40 different payment methods that are really, really relevant for the travel sector. And please, do go to our website, and we're going to release our global payments report very soon that does list all the countries and that does list all the payment methods that are available. And I would guess that most of them are available through our systems as well.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Gene, do you happen to have a question?
Yeah, I actually had a brief comment and a question. Thomas, I recently moderated a panel discussion among some significant distributors and suppliers like Emirates Air, Airlines, and Booking.com and TripAdvisor, and it was in China at the Travel Daily Distribution Summit earlier this month. I was struck by a Goldman Sachs study that was at the center of this conversation about the Chinese traveler. Only 4% of them have passports, 4% of folks in China, and there'll be more than 73 million college graduates in China in the next 10 years. So that speaks directly to one of the points you made about Asia leading the way with the mobile generation, alternative payment opportunities, and a gigantic number of people who still have opportunity to secure the means by which they make outbound travel to many of our audiences' delight, I would think, over time. So that's just a point of information that from some relatively current research that's been out there from Goldman Sachs. My question is this. Many of the leading suppliers have created credit card instruments themselves as part of their ancillary revenue strategy, non-air revenue strategy, but also as part of their loyalty program. Can you talk a little bit about WorldPay's perspective on how that little corner of how people pay their for their tickets of your chart earlier, about 0.1 or 0.5 or 0.4% of people using miles? It's not just miles that people will be using, but they may be using other personal information that they release to suppliers and intermediaries as currency, not necessarily cash, but it behaves like cash if it's exchangeable for services. Talk a little bit about how loyalty and payment services are happening, maybe behind the scenes, and are going to be growing or not growing in the future.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in there, and I guess the first one is, do loyalty points become a currency in itself? And that is a valid question and a valid point, and we do see that happening, and we do see it happening, especially when it comes to fraud, because what happens very often is that people use credit cards to buy loyalty points because they know they can then use the loyalty points to buy flights and other services. So there, the conversion from money or credit cards into loyalty points is a really crucial one. And whilst it's not really travel, it's very, very important that taking those kind of payments are very, very tightly monitored. The other question is that I heard in there is why are people using their credit cards? And yes, we've actually asked that question as well, and we found out that a lot of people using that because they have additional benefits to the credit card. So you get an insurance, a travel insurance, and you get miles. And flipping that around, a lot of airlines on their side, in particular in the US and large carriers, we see that they are taking advantage of that and starting to work with the schemes and issue co-branded cards, which it has two advantages. First of all, you create that loyalty. I know that, for example, British Airways, they have a hugely successful Amex program, and people are using those cards to get points to get flights. So they get the loyalty, but they also get a part of the revenue that comes out of using those cards with airlines. So the interchange revenue is part of their is part of what they're earning. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And just to that point, I think United's credit card program is one of the linchpins of their ancillary revenue strategy for just the reason you talked about. I think they're leading all of the major carriers, maybe all of the carriers, in a percentage of revenue that they get from non-air services.
We have a question from audience member Peter Kelly. Can WorldPay advise an airline on the alternate payments it can process in various countries, European Union, outside of Europe, Middle East, North Africa, Russia? The question, not from so much from the GDS channel, but for the direct booking channel.
Absolutely, and this is what I think where we pride ourselves is having that knowledge to be able to help airlines to determine in whatever market they are planning to do, to analyze what payment methods are available locally, what payment methods do work for airlines, and then what payment methods would you like to use in addition to cards without cannibalizing your credit card transactions, but which actually payment method mix is the ideal mix to get most customers with the least risk and the least complexity. So absolutely, this is what we do. This is what our relationship managers, who are verticalized relationship managers who do nothing but airlines. This is what they do every day, and I guess this is where our whole payment reports and this research in particular helps us to support our relationship managers to do their job even better.
Fantastic. Several readers have questions about trying to get a sense of what are the most popular used alternative payment methods. The agents want to increase conversion on direct sales, agencies and other players, suppliers on their own websites, but they're, as you say, there's fragmented markets. But is there some sort of, which are the most famous APMs for, say, some of the big regions?
So this is again very specific to the region. So in Asia, in China, I would say Alipay and Tenpay and WeChat, WePay are the three main alternative payment methods that make up most of the share of alternative payment methods. If you look into Europe, Germany, if you don't offer Sofort, and Netherlands, if you don't offer Ideal, you basically lose out on 2/3 of your potential market. So there is probably only PayPal is the one that I would say is known across the world and used across the world. That certainly is a major one, but I think if you really boil it down, there's probably only 10 that I would say are really playing in the league where it will be used in more than one country. So there's new ones coming out across Europe, which is Trustly, which brings together a lot of direct banking applications. And there is, many of them are very country specific. So if you want to operate in a particular country, that is the payment method that you need to offer to access the local market. So there isn't really one answer, but those that I've mentioned are really the big ones, I think, who are in the league in their own.
Thanks, Thomas. I know it was a hard question because it's a fragmented market, but several people are asking. Joanna, Rebecca, and Colum Fitzpatrick are sort of wondering if there's data on the UK or the US that's available on the WorldPay website you mentioned, or if that data was not included in the study.
Yes, so we do very soon publish our new global payments report. On the website at the moment, you'll find the current version, and that really goes country by country. I think there's about 70 countries that we cover where we do list the payment methods that are most commonly used in those countries. If you wait another couple of weeks, you will hear from us about the next edition of that global payment report.
Broadly, in the Europe and US, are you seeing the trend of there is an increasing trend of behavior of using savings to pay for vacations through channels like PayPal?
Yeah, well, in the PayPal is the mechanism to access those savings. Sure. So we do see a trend to savings, and PayPal is one of those payment methods that allow you to access your funds that you have saved up on your bank account. So that is an easy way. If you don't have a credit card, that is one way to access it directly.
How important is security of payment methods to different countries and demographics? Do some care more than others? Kristen Peterson's asking.
Yes, they do. If you think about India, they do mandate things like 3D Secure. There is a mandate coming into Europe with the Payment Service Directive 2. They will mandate dual factor authentication, such as a 3D Secure or device or your personal fingerprints to identify yourself. So security is not only something that is important to merchants and card schemes, but more and more the regulators, more and more countries and their financial institutions are concerned about online payment security, and they start to step in and mandate what has to happen to make that a safe marketplace overall.
So, Thomas, we have a couple of questions from people who are in markets that have not traditionally had installment payments for travel, and they're skeptical. They think that this is just a gimmick to try to have maybe more expensive because there's more payments. There's more moments, as it were, that a charge can be levied, or and in the experience in some countries is that interest-free payment options have been handled by companies where the merchant has to pay the equivalent of a very high merchant service fee. So, what is the expense that people that are playing in this ecosystem may have to consider?
Again, there's not one answer. I think you can probably compare it to your normal credit card interest rate, which can probably vary of anything about 5 to 20%, depending on your deal. Yes, there are some who abuse the situation, but if you are just playing, if you're serious about it and you want to have a serious offer, then I think if you and stay along with your interests that you get on your credit card, that will enable you not to disgruntle your customers, because that is a market accepted rate. But you do offer that to customers who don't have credit cards and who don't have access to that kind of credit facility. So again, same with surcharging. If you go over the top with surcharging, you will disgruntle your customers. If you stay in line with what's common in the market and accepted in the market, then you will find it a very attractive proposition.
Okay. We'll be wrapping up the webinar in about 3 minutes because we're at the hour. If we have one more key question here, it's does WorldPay offer a targeted product or technical development for travel agencies so that they can have a better payment experience for travelers through their website?
We believe we do offer to all our customers a really good payment experience. I think that the travel experience is probably the least complex in terms of the actual experience itself. If you think about digital, where you have recurring transactions, this is much more complex. Or invisible transactions in a game console, for example. I think we probably offer one of the best experiences, and there's many ways of integrating and consuming that experience. For many of our customers, they actually create their own payment experience themselves, because ultimately they own that payment window, and we just get the data. And there's the option, of course, to use our hosted payment pages, where we provide that payment window, and we are probably one of the better ones when it comes to mobile. So we have very highly flexible mobile payment pages that you can use. So I would say the bigger customers of ours, they look after the experience themselves. We help them to create an experience. We can advise them on how to optimize it in the travel world. If you look at if you look at the online payment journey, that's a report that we've done on how to optimize the payment experience in the travel world. We believe we can help our customers to make that the best possible experience.
Fantastic. Well, time is a factor, so we have to wrap up today's webinar. Alton Franco has asked if there's a replay available, and there is. We will be emailing a video replay and the slide presentation that Thomas gave today within about 24 hours from now to you for registering. We thank you so much all around the world for participating. We thank Thomas for this. Note that paythatway.worldpay.com is a site that has many of the breakdowns. We had some questions we weren't able to get to, but there were the answers to those questions about the individual countries and demographics can be found at paythatway.worldpay.com. Thanks to everyone for today, and have a good rest of your day, evening, or night.